Very good evening. It is Sunday the 10th of October. It's getting darker and it doesn't help when I wake up in the morning and someone sends me a link and the hamster cheeks is on telly. Oh, how desperate have they got? How desperate have they got?
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
Very good evening. Yes, hamster cheeks. Debbie, I could think of worse names, but hamster cheeks is what I settled on. He was on the BBC Northwest Politics show, and what you've got to understand is that his attendance, his featuring on the armchair of Northwest Politics is not accidental. There is a grooming gang report that is being sat on as we speak by Baroness, whatever her name is, the name will come to me, and Andy Burnham's deputy, who has the role as police and crime commissioner. Beverly Hughes is her name, and she is sat on it, and what they are desperately trying to do is improve their profile in the lead up to this report, because no matter how long she sits on it, she'll have to release it sooner or later. And I'm hearing Ridgway and Newsman, the two authors, are reluctant to mess around too much with their conclusions. So that's where we are up to. It is he was on, and we'll get to it. We'll get to it. A very, very good evening to all of you. Let me just bring up some hellos. And yes, thanks, Debbie. No, I do not need anything or nothing that you could, you or anyone else could, I think, do. I think the people who've sent me a message on Friday, I sent the tribunal back a list, and I've emailed all of you the joining details for the morning. It starts at 10 o'clock, so I would imagine you'd want to join about 9:45 and get your equipment set up. Ordinarily you'd be able to turn up to the tribunal, but these days all these things are done by Zoom. I just want to say a very good evening to my friend Lee. I know you've had some bad news, and I look forward to seeing you, Lee. So just give me a call, and I'll happily. I want to come and have a cup of tea with you. So just give me a call. I am sorry, Nikki, as to why you've got no sound. I've got sound here, and I think other people have got sound. So maybe you need to refresh your stream and see what happens. I'm looking at the stream settings on my screen, and it says excellent connection, and so I'm not sure why that is. I don't think you're going to get any contact with that young woman, and with the greatest of respect, I know you're her friend, Debbie, but I think she's with her attempts to incriminate me in an attempted setup involving Pakistani mobsters who tried to portray me as a child sex offender, and this young woman was interviewing these potential victims, shall we say, whereby they were giving evidence to her, and she was preparing them to go to the police. I don't think she's done herself any favors, I'm afraid, Debbie, and she won't come across, regardless of anything, she won't come across in any way credible. Okay, good evening, Paul. Right, so let's get started. I don't know if you can see this or not. I'll try and zoom it. So this is the response from the judge in my Freedom of Information tribunal case. And I want you to read number 4 and number 5. So this is a case where the public authority has claimed that the requests made by the appellant are vexatious. It is very unlikely, indeed, that evidence about requests by other people will assist the tribunal with its task in this appeal, as each request and all the circumstances around it need to be considered separately and holistically. In all likelihood, it will not assist the tribunal to compare the requests made by the appellant with different requests made by other people. We will, of course, listen and consider any submission that the appellant wishes to make on this case. Okay, what does that mean? That means that the entire system is set up in such a way, and every justice campaigner who's gone through the process will tell you the same. The system is rigged against them. So this is a judge telling me beforehand that my witnesses will likely be of no use to me whatsoever at my tribunal tomorrow. Now the problem is, no matter what he says or do, we'll keep going and we'll keep going and we'll keep going. But what's happened here is the Information Commissioner's Office has decided my Freedom of Information requests were vexatious on a number of reasons. One was because of the number of requests I put in. I think it was something like 6 requests over 9 months. I've got witnesses who have put in at least the same, if not more. So how is that not relevant? How can my 6 requests be vexatious when someone like Paul's 7 or 8 or 9 not be vexatious? 2, they claimed my Freedom of Information requests were vexatious because I was making mischief. Yet those very same Freedom of Information requests, at least 2 of them, identical, almost identical, one submitted by Anita, one submitted by Paul Jarvis, who's not joined us yet this evening, were deemed not to be vexatious and answered. And the third reason is the council claimed that they were vexatious because it would be malicious of me. If they gave me the information, I would use it in a malicious way. How I use public information is up to me, as it is up to you how you use public information. It's not for anyone else to determine how public information is used and presented afterwards. So, unfortunately for the judge, this isn't going to be easy for him tomorrow. And finally, the council are withholding what's called my subject access request, which is my own personal data that I'm legally entitled to. And they're withholding that because they believe the Information Commissioner's Office has given them the right to withhold that, because the Information Commissioner's Office they believe, agreed with them in his or her, in their initial judgment. But the problem we have here is the council submitted a number of reasons, and when looking at the case, the Information Commissioner's Office ignored their reasons and came up with their own reasons, and didn't tell the council that the reasons that they went with were deemed to be not appropriate. So the council believes it can withhold my data when legally it can't. This is just a massive mess, and there are significant consequences for the entire country on this judgment. It isn't just about me. There are significant consequences for the entire country on the back of this. So we'll see what happens tomorrow morning, and whether or not he allows my witnesses or not. But you can see it is also very unlikely that evidence from witnesses will assist the tribunal in deciding the public interest. Hold on. The public interest in wanting to know whether a counsellor is a convicted child sex offender. Really? Is that not in the public interest? Yeah. Apparently the tribunal has experience and expertise in considering these points. I think the tribunal, as every government type layer and layer and layer I've got through, I think the tribunal are as bent as every other layer of government I've come across. Okay, I doubt it, man. I doubt very much the tribunal are in any way. Yeah. Okay. Let me play you this video whilst I send some invitations out to people who I don't think they've subscribed to the well, you've all got it, so I don't think they're subscribed, but they're sending messages. So let me try and send a couple of invitations out, and I'll play this video first for you to all listen to, and I'm going to play it again and pause it at key points, but I don't want to get in the way first. I just want to play it for you. So here we go.
This week, the new leader of our largest city, how its regional rival is fighting food poverty and the battle between our towns. Coming up, we'll hear from the groundbreaking councillor taking charge at Manchester Town Hall.
It's for me quite difficult actually that in 2021 it's still a remarkable thing that I'm a woman and that I'm openly gay. So I'd love to get to the position of it being probably one of the least interesting things about me.
And food for thought, Liverpool's master plan to make sure that everyone is eating properly.
People didn't want food banks because although people do need them, there seems to be a stigma attached.
All that, plus we're behind the scenes with one MP at the Conservative Party conference in Manchester, and after Tyson Fury's knockout performance last night in Vegas. We have a couple of political heavyweights of our own this morning. In the blue corner is Kieran Mullen, the Conservative MP for Crewe and Nantwich. And in the red corner is Jim McMahon, Labour MP for Oldham West and Royton and Shadow Transport Secretary. First though, let's have a look at the week's main talking points with Suzanne Haley.
Jacob Rees-Mogg was confronted outside the Conservative Party conference in Manchester over fitness to work tests for disabled people.
If I don't do it, people like me with my own cerebral palsy. Nobody will.
Rochdale was told it must take more refugees despite having more per head than anywhere else in England. In business, a new digital warfare centre will be based at Malmesbury, while Jaguar Land Rover is investing in toolmaking in Merseyside.
This is about really bringing a dying trade back to the UK.
Marcus Rashford's charity work and anti-poverty campaigning earned him an honorary degree.
There's a shortage of food and they need the meals, especially going into winter.
And Manchester City Council has its first female leader. Bev Craig succeeds Sir Richard Leese.
We'll be speaking to Bev Craig later on. We also saw Manchester United's Marcus Rashford there, watched by Sir Alex Ferguson, receiving his honorary degree from the University of Manchester for fighting food poverty. Here's what Marcus said about the government removing the £20 a week uplift in universal credit.
Yesterday, millions of families across the UK lost a life.
Right, well, as I said, we've got Kieran Mullen in crew with us today and Jim McMahon in the studio. Thank you, both of you. Kieran, if I can come to you first of all. Marcus Rashford there making the point about the £20 uplift in universal credit being removed. In his speech, Boris Johnson, in his speech, there was lots of laughs at the Tory party conference. There wasn't very much about the crisis facing many families at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously not privy to Boris Johnson's speech writing team, and a conference speech has got a different role to play than Marcus's speech, which is obviously very much focused on the issues that he thinks are important, that all of us think are important in terms of poverty. I think what's important is what the government doing about it, and they've announced £500 million of extra funding for families and households that will be in need over the next 6 months or so. And I think that's the right thing to do. It's about using different measures. Throughout this pandemic, we've seen grant support given to councils. We've seen hundreds of millions of pounds given to charities to support families. I've seen that spent locally with lots of charities in the area. So I think it's about the government actually doing.
Were you disappointed, though, because, you know, everyone's eyes were on him at the Tory party conference, that he didn't address some of these problems, you know, the energy prices, the food shortages, things that are really affecting people every day at the moment?
Well, I think one of the good things about the Prime Minister, and I think it's one of the issues that Labour MPs have, is that sometimes we need someone that's going to champion the positive things about our country. Of course, as politicians and people like myself, I'm in politics to support people that are in need and need more help. But actually, the Prime Minister's got a role in lifting up the whole country, being positive and championing some of the great successes we've had. Things like the vaccine programme, things like our ability to come out of the lockdown, the strength of our economy at the moment.
And is he doing that? So is he doing that while he's on holiday in Marbella?
Well, I think the Prime Minister is entitled to a holiday like everybody is. You know, I'm sure, as is always the case with the Prime Minister, it doesn't mean that they're not able to lead the government and be available when they need to be. I don't know the details of the Prime Minister's holiday myself.
Jim McMahon, Kwasi Kwarteng has said that he will protect that price cap on energy costs. So that is good. That's going to protect people over the winter. They're not going to see their energy prices soar.
Well, I think we need to wait and see what actually happens on that. I'm not convinced at all that the government will stand on the side of working people in favour of the multinational gas and electric companies. I think a lot of people now are looking at next year and thinking the national insurance increase is coming, the council tax increase is coming, inflation is going through the roof with food prices and the rest of it going through the roof.
The government is giving £500 million, though.
But it's a drop in the ocean. I mean, if you think about the universal credit uplift, which was a lifeline for millions of people, you know, over £1,000 a year. For my own town, that's going to take £30 million from the local economy. So when the government talk about levelling up and supporting working people, the evidence just doesn't support it.
I'm just going to move on very slightly.
Okay, I think you can hear me. So, a couple of points to raise on that as we're going through. And yes, Sue, I have sent Lynn the broadcast, as well as a few other people. It's just very difficult for me to do a dozen things at once. When I've started, I can't really use the phone and do all of that. But I have sent the link whilst the video was playing. I sent a few other people the link whilst the video was playing. What I want to raise there, first of all, is see that commentator there, and I have her paused there probably on purpose. Did you notice, first of all, the dig? Did you notice the dig that, first of all, she had of the Prime Minister having a holiday? That was not accidental. Next, you saw, and you can see his hamster cheeks. Come on, can you not see his hamster cheeks? He's had, his council have had tens of millions of pounds as a consequence of COVID grants. His senior council staff have had pay rises, massive pay rises for some of them. They've been hiring staff, unnecessary staff. Press officers. Since when were press officers essential? Multiple press officers. And then he's complaining about gas prices going up when there's a cap. The government put a cap on it, and the government minister in charge has come out and said the cap stays. It's every 6 months it's reviewed. The cap stays despite pressure. It's come out, the government minister's come out and said the cap stays. And McMahon is, oh, I don't know about that. So he's calling the government minister a liar when we know who the liars really are in all of this. And then he raises council tax. In Oldham, we pay record council taxes. Some of the highest council taxes, in fact, it is the highest council tax in the country, is paid for by the people of Oldham. Oldham's benefits bill is indeed eye-watering. I shared it with you last week. I think it was £100 million just on tax credits a year. It is absolutely disgraceful what this man is claiming. I'll just move myself up here. It's absolutely disgraceful what this man is claiming. And so you're all aware, the news I am hearing is council tax is going up again. And remember, council tax is controlled by the council. That's what it's called, council tax. They increased it by over 3% this year. They lied. They can't even get the figures right and called it 2.99%. It was over 3%, as we demonstrated at the time of the budget. And they want to increase it this coming year. So for next April, they want to increase it by between 5 and 7%. It means your council tax will have gone up by 10% in just over 12 months. Your council tax will have gone up by 10%. And the reason why? The reason is to pay their extortionate wages for all the senior staff that they have, and £40 million just to service the debt on loans, just to service the interest payments. That's not paying any of it back, just to service the interest payments. £40 million a year.
Kieran there, because I mean you can't see this unfortunately, but I'm holding up a copy of The Observer which today says that there's a nursing crisis. Obviously you as a doctor who's worked in A&E, are you concerned about this? It's another example of shortages, where we've had lorry driver shortages, we've got abattoir worker shortages. Is this a concern?
I think for a long, long time we've needed to do more in terms of home growing our NHS workforce. So for too long, I think we've relied on recruiting workers from overseas, whether that's nurses or doctors. And as we make that adjustment, it's going to be difficult. I mean, one of the things I was most proud of in our manifesto at the last election was that commitment to 50,000 more nurses working in the NHS, and that's going to be a big challenge for the government, but I'm glad that they put that there as a challenge. We're seeing good progress. There are 10,000 more nurses working in the NHS now. The NHS workforce as a whole is at record-breaking levels. But of course, one of the reasons why I supported the tax increase that Jim voted against was because I know that we need to put more money into the NHS to meet the rising healthcare demand.
Give Jim a chance to respond to that.
Well, he knows full well that there is not a plan for health and social care in this country. We are going to be all paying more national insurance as a result of the measures that Kieran voted for, but that will not translate into a material improvement in social care and health, and he knows that. And it's all very well saying that we need to transition to support British workers, but the truth is there is no plan. There was no plan to support.
And Nantwich, compared to the big cities, they're nowhere near as good, and that's why I'm very.
When Building Schools for the Future was cancelled.
More money into the NHS to meet the rising healthcare.
Sorry, you can hear me now. You should be able to hear me now. Sorry about that. That's me unmute, not unmuting the mute. All right, so this is the crux of what is taking place. This is the argument. And I can't believe it. I genuinely can't believe it, because the two sides cannot be clear in what's just been said. And I'll play it again just on that next bit so you hear it. And you'll see. What took place is the Tories have taken a decision that we will phase out the reliance of importing cheap foreign labour and growing our own. And to grow our own, we need to improve working conditions, increase pay, take time to train our workforce. And Labour's position is, no, we need to keep importing the cheap foreign workforce. It's as black and white as that. It played out over the last couple of weeks with the lorry drivers, and now it's playing out with the NHS. Now, as a working class bloke, since I was a child, the narrative. And this isn't just a white community thing, it's been an Asian community thing, a black Caribbean community thing. It's been a repetitive narrative I've heard that they can no longer get the work that they used to get because the work doesn't pay. The work doesn't pay. I don't think I'm on mute, so maybe you're just behind on the stream. I hope you're behind on the stream. Thank you, Debbie. Okay, so just listen to McMahon, because his response here is perfect.
Give Jim a chance to respond to that.
Well, he knows full well that there is not a plan for health and social care in this country. We are going to be all paying more national insurance as a result of the measures that Kieran voted for, but that will not translate into a material improvement in social care and health, and he knows that. And it's all very well saying that we need to transition to support British workers, but the truth is there is no plan. There was no plan to support that Brexit transition that would really invest in either nurses, so, you know, on the nurses' bursary, on tuition fees and the rest of it, or even on HGVs.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on actually, because we've been.
Okay, you heard it there. You heard it loud and clear. And the reason why there was no plan, or there was a hesitancy of the plan, and McMahon, the hamster weasel, knows it, was because McMahon and all his mates were trying desperately to scupper Brexit. And even though Oldham voted for Brexit, McMahon, Abrahams, all of them were trying to scupper Brexit. The fight, and I voted Remain, by the way, just so there's no ambiguity, but I believe in a democracy, and I lost. What McMahon and his mates decided was you were too working class, thick, common and racist, that there should be another referendum, and the first one shouldn't count. So they were busy trying to scupper it in Parliament, which is why the focus was on getting Brexit done, which is what the election was voted on. And now we find ourselves in this position, and it's going to be tough. Of course it's going to be tough. But the question is simple. Do we continue, in a town like Oldham, do we continue to create, to expand a welfare-dependent town, high in unemployment, high on poverty, high on dependency, welfare dependency? Or do we say, no, we need to train our own people to do the work in our own country? That's the decision. It's as simple as that. And you've seen what he's got to say. The Labour Party position is no, keep the working classes poor, keep the businesses rich, because they let them continue having poor working conditions, poor pay, that we can get immigrant labour, the next wave and the next wave and the next wave to take on. That is McMahon's position, and that is the Labour Party position. And that's not me saying it, you've just heard it. You've just heard it.
About the Tory party conference, and just thought it'd be quite interesting to get a little flavour of what conference is really like for any people that don't go to any of the party conferences. The Warrington South MP Andy Carter was our guest last week, and he agreed to take us behind the scenes.
Hello, it's Andy Carter, Member of Parliament for Warrington South, and welcome to the Conservative Party conference. My first time being here as a Member of Parliament. We're going to take you inside and show you what's happening inside the main conference hall. This is the main conference hub. There are stands all around us, different organisations. And tips for me, my first conference as an MP, I'm already realising getting around everywhere is quite a job. What tips have you got for me?
Pace yourself would be my tip. I think you get invited to everything, don't go to everything, go easy on the booze.
Okay, whilst that's playing, I'll share with you that Ian Duncan Smith was attacked on the streets of Manchester. And he was attacked on the streets of Manchester as a consequence of the Oldham MP, Angela Rayner, referring to the Tories as scum. Because that language escalated an environment which an attack like that could take place.
She's just left the stage, and a very clear message, Build Back Better, and I'm really delighted with what I've heard from the Prime Minister today.
Well, thanks to Andy for doing that. Some great camera work there inside the conference hall, where Michael Gove also spoke on his new Levelling Up brief. And at a smaller fringe event, it was put to him that Jim McMahon's Oldham wasn't benefiting as much from Manchester's growth as other towns nearby.
I would want to, and it's part of my mission to, better understand which towns around Manchester are succeeding and why. And at the risk of entering into territory where I really am only tiptoeing, it seems to me that there are things that are happening in Wigan, which are working, which are not happening in Oldham yet.
He went on actually to say, Jim McMahon, as I'm sure you know, that he's looking at what local leadership has been like in Oldham and why it hasn't received the attention that it should have done. Well, you know, you are very much part of that, being a former leader. He's putting the blame on you.
Well, listen, Michael Gove has got history in Oldham. You know, he was the Education Secretary when Building Schools for the Future was cancelled and scrapped completely. He was the Justice Secretary when our 2 courts were closed. So he has background in Oldham. And what I would say is this, you can't level up if the economic foundations of a town are fragmented. And that's what we're seeing in Oldham.
Wigan has, though. Wigan has benefited from Manchester's success. Why not Oldham?
Well, I think Wigan and Oldham are 2 very different places, both in terms of their economic base, but also their relationship to Manchester. You know, Wigan is a town in its own right that stands actually some distance from Manchester. Oldham is a town that is coterminous with Manchester. So they are very different places, very different economies. But actually there are similarities in terms of investment in its people, in education, early years, and then skills. But also actually the condition of our housing stock, which is a big issue in a town like Oldham, where there's large parts of our housing market that frankly is not fit for purpose, where there isn't an inherent demand for that housing stock from local people.
As a former local leader there, as the MP, who's to blame for that?
Well, of course, I don't think there's any point in almost laying out blame, because what it really needs, and what many towns and cities in the UK need, are for national government and local government to work together. And so I would say this, if we remove the party politics away from it and we just focus on the facts, the truth is that over the last 10 years, Oldham has not seen the investment that it deserves. In fact, the opposite.
That is party
had many
politics, isn't it?
Well, it's a matter of fact. It's a point. It's a matter of fact that our county court has closed, our magistrates court has closed. We're a town of 250,000 people, but we haven't got a single custody cell open, so people feel like justice has left town. And what I would say is this, if there is a genuine commitment to work together for the interests of the people of Oldham, then it's an open door. Okay. But if it's just about taking swipes, I'm afraid the buck will ultimately stop with the government because they have made those decisions.
So the buck does ultimately...
Okay. In fact, let me just see what we're up to on that screen. I can't really tell, but I want to come up on the camera first whilst I have this conversation with you. You see the deflection there? Michael Gove, first of all, the BBC didn't put the video bit in to do with leadership, because you would have seen or heard what Gove was actually getting at, which is what we all think of the town's leadership. It wasn't just about levelling up in terms of making the most of the opportunities that are out there. No, it was a deeper dig. Now, what McMahon made reference to, justice has left town, and he makes reference to we haven't got a single custody cell and the 2 courts have shut down. What has that got to do with economic prosperity in the town? Unless that's a silent endorsement of a vigilante taking one of his associates taken to the streets of the town in his vigilante street patrol. Why else bring that up in response to that question? Also, in his immediate response, he made reference to the cancelling of building schools for the future, BSF. Do you know why they cancelled building schools for the future? Does anyone know why? You've all seen the photographs and the news stories, and I can't stand the guy. He's one of Neil Wilby's mate, Mr. Potts, at Newman College. I don't know what a head teacher is doing endorsing Wilby, who puts pictures up of young women with their breasts, focusing on their breasts. I don't know what a head teacher is doing, endorsing a man's Twitter profile who does that. But put all of that to one side for a moment. You've seen the school on the verge of pulling their hair out at how badly that building was put together, the floods. It's more complicated. It's more simple than that. Building schools for the future was underpinned by something called PFI, Private Finance Initiative. So the private sector loaned money to the government to build these schools. And with that came contracts. So the stories were, and these weren't stories, the evidence was, you couldn't change a light bulb. It was contracted to this company to come and change a light bulb, and so on and so on and so on. So PFI was borrowed money on astronomical interest rates and also with contracts, and these contracts were then sold on to other companies who made more money and more money and more money. Yes, exactly. Legalized loan sharks, essentially. So that's why when the Conservative government came in, they put an end to building schools for the future. Because the framework in which it operated, building schools by borrowing money off loan sharks, who then sold their debt on to other loan sharks, and the repayments fell to either the local authority or the schools, meant that less money that schools received was being spent on the actual education of our children. So that's why they got rid of building schools for the future. And here is McMahon, the imbecile, is either thick as pig shit or is so busy repeating rhetoric he's forgotten the reasons why the scheme was cancelled. Building schools for the future was rightfully cancelled. The PFI schemes, they've introduced it into the NHS. It's been disastrous. Everything Labour did through the PFI schemes was absolute on reflection. Yeah, we've built these schools, we've built these new hospitals. We've indebted councils, we've indebted public bodies for generations to come. Absolute stupidity. Absolute stupidity. And that is why that is the case, Paul. That is the case. And I've seen Paul's working backwards. If we've got 38 million, 40 million pounds worth of interest-only payments, it is the equivalent of, it's not, how much have we borrowed in total to be paying back 40 million pounds a year? And Paul's estimated it that Oldham's debts are at over £1 billion. And I don't think he's wrong. I think if you work backwards and say, okay, this is the interest we're paying back and it's interest only, of 38, 40 million pounds a year, what's the actual debt? And the NHS is the same, Mark, see? And that numpty is saying, oh, they scrapped building schools for the future. It should never have been introduced. So one, you've got a Labour MP advocating the bringing in of cheap labour at the expense of training up our own workforce. He said it himself. You've seen it there. He said that himself from what his response. If you've got to take that as what he meant. And now secondly, he wants to borrow money from loan sharks to build schools. And then leave the schools with budgets that don't work because they're spending more money on changing the light bulbs than hiring a teacher. Absolute. Give me 1 second. It'll take me a moment to bring it back up to the right spot.
This week, the new leader of our line. We've got abattoir worker shortages. I'm just going to move on very slightly, Kieran, there, because, you can't see this, unfortunately.
What actually happens on that, I'm not convinced at all that the government will stand on the side of working people.
Unfortunately, but
Brexit transition that would really invest in either nurses, so, on the nurses.
That we just have many inside the conference hall.
It seems to me that...
He's saying Wigan has, though. Wigan has benefited from Manchester City.
Sorry, I'm sure you'll pick up from here.
But I think Wigan and Oldham are two very different places, both in terms of their economic base, but also their relationship to Manchester. Wigan is a town in its own right that stands actually some distance from Manchester. Oldham is a town that is coterminous with Manchester. So they are very different places, very different economies.
So here he's also claiming that because of Oldham's closeness to Manchester, it suffers. No, because Bury is also very close to Manchester. Normally what happens if you're close to a big city region, if you're close to the city, you actually benefit, you don't suffer. He's unbelievable.
So there are similarities in terms of investment in its people, in education, early years, and then skills, but also actually the condition of our housing stock, which is a big issue in a town like Oldham, where there's large parts of our housing market that frankly is not fit for purpose, where there isn't an inherent demand for that housing stock from local people.
As a former local leader there, as the MP, who's to blame for that?
Well, of course, I don't think there's any point in almost laying out blame, because what it really needs, and what many towns and cities in the UK need, are for national government and local government to work together. And so I would say this: if we remove the party politics away from it and we just focus on the facts, the truth is that over the last 10 years, Oldham has not seen the investment that it deserves. In fact, the opposite. It's had,
that is party
had many
politics,
cuts.
isn't it?
Well, it's a matter of fact. It's a point. It's a matter of fact that our county court has closed, our magistrates court has closed. We're a town of 250,000 people, but we haven't got a single custody cell open, so people feel like justice has left town. And what I would say is this: if there is a genuine commitment to work together for the interests of the people of Oldham, then it's an open door. Okay. But if it's just about taking swipes, I'm afraid the buck will ultimately stop with the government, because they have made those decisions.
So the buck does ultimately stop with the government, and he wants more investment, Kieran.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see that Oldham, like Crewe, has got a town deal which is delivering, as it is in Crewe, millions of pounds of investment. So Oldham's got £24.4 million on a town deal, more than £10 million as part of the Future High Street. It's had £28 million committed to spending in its local hospital. So the investment is flowing there, but it is also about leadership. You know, part of being on a town deal is that you have a group of people working together to deliver for the town. You know, we meet regularly on my town deal, and I'm committed to showing that local leadership. And whilst Jim's turned up to some of his town deal meetings, his colleague Debbie has barely turned up to any of their town deal meetings. So I think that's what Michael means about local leadership. As MPs, it's all very well good to complain, but you have to get stuck in with helping.
So there you go. Exposed once again. McMahon has turned up to some meetings. Some meetings. Debbie Abrahams has hardly turned up to any meetings.
Solve the problems in your town.
Come on then, Jim, come back.
Well, listen, I don't need to defend Debbie's work record. She's an outstanding MP, and she's an outstanding advocate for all.
Debbie Abrahams was sacked from her role in the shadow cabinet, I think, or she was sacked, disciplined, whatever it was, for bullying her own workforce. She won her election off the back of a cartel-controlled bloc Muslim vote, because she lost in pretty much every white area everywhere else. Got hammered. Look at those cheeks. Look at those ears. Look at those cheeks. How much weight has he put on since he became an MP, do you think? 5 stone?
And we all play our different roles in particular interests in Oldham, and we all contribute.
Well, we all know what roles and what interests you have in Oldham, don't we, Brother Jamal?
In different ways, and I can say, because I've attended meetings of the town board with Debbie present, that actually take out the party politics of that was local government and national government working together around a single plan for the town. So rather than making it a divisive issue in the way that Kieran wants, that actually is a rare example of where we have worked together. But it's go beyond that. We need investment in education, in skills, in training, in our housing stock and transport.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned transport, because I was going to come to you, Kieran, about transport, because it's been reported in The Independent today that the North is getting a pared-back version of Northern Powerhouse Rail scheme. Liverpool's not getting its 20-mile section of high-speed rail. Manchester, no underground station. What would you say to that?
Well, I've not seen the article that you're talking about. What I do know is, for example, when it comes to buses, we're spending £3 billion on buses. We're investing in rail in the north at record levels.
Is the government serious, though, about investing in transport in the north?
Yes, absolutely. And as I said, for me, there is a lot of focus on rail, and as a town that's going to benefit from HS2, that's a good thing. But buses are just as important. That's the thing I noticed the most. If you compare bus services in towns like Crewe and Nantwich compared to the big cities, they're nowhere near as good. And that's why I'm very glad that the government is putting that record amount in to buses. And as I said, the levels of investment in rail, we're spending billions of pounds a year on railway services across the whole country, actually.
OK. Kieran, thank you. Michael Gove said that levelling up meant 4.
OK, just another second moment now. Transport. McMahon mentioned transport as well. The entire council, and this was a Labour-run council, relentlessly campaigned for the trams this, trams that, and their strategy at the time was they believed that by having the tram access to Manchester in the way it is now would mean people from other parts of Greater Manchester would come to Oldham. At the time I still had an office on Union Street, and I sat there scratching my head looking around, and I asked people, what will someone from Manchester come to Oldham for? What will people from Chorlton come to Oldham for? Didsbury come to Oldham for? They just wanted it because everyone else had it. It's the same with that nonsense cinema that you're paying for out of your council taxes. £42 million that cost, that we've managed to extract out of the council information. Originally budgeted at £10 million, all under the tenure of McMahon, and they repeatedly hid and refused to release the Freedom of Information data that would show what had happened there. And it's not just that, Denise. It's ruined Union Street. If you go down Union Street, it's ruined Union Street.
Things in his speech, strengthening local leadership, raising living standards, improving public services, and providing the tools to enhance pride in your neighbourhood. But this week, Rochdale's local leaders were told that they had to accept more asylum seekers, despite already having more per head than anywhere else in England. Here's how those helping them locally reacted.
We do have a lot of asylum seekers, yes, and they're still in need of more support and more services in Rochdale.
A lot of them, they can speak English. This is number one problem that we have. And we have to look for interpreter for them at the same time. So it's a bit stressful, really, it's a bit stressful.
So Kieran, if you're serious, your party's serious about levelling up, you listen to that, it doesn't sound like you're levelling up, that places like Rochdale always take the brunt of this thing.
Yeah, I personally think we do need to look again at how we decide where we put asylum seekers when we're housing them. There's too much of an emphasis on councils coming forward to say they're willing to take them, and I just don't think that necessarily works. There is some sense to saying that actually, if housing costs are very, very high in some areas, you're not making the most of the money available for asylum seekers if you house them in those very expensive areas. But I think there needs to be some kind of balance to share the burden more evenly.
Yeah, I know, Jim, that Oldham also takes perhaps more than its fair share in the past, but there is a point there about housing costs. They're a lot higher in the southeast, aren't they?
I think as a nation, we need to accept, if we want to play our role on the global stage, that where there is a crisis that requires asylum seekers to be accommodated, that we step up to our international responsibilities. But it's also very important that in that process, we understand the impact that it has on communities. And the truth is that there are too many local authorities in the UK that are not accepting asylum seekers, and that puts a disproportionate burden on those who are willing to. And what I would say is it focuses and narrows down even further. So you have a concentration on some local authorities, but then even within local authorities, you can have concentration on wards. And then even with those wards, you can have a concentration on individual streets, because certainly in the Northwest, Serco will do a deal with a handful of private landlords for their housing stock, which can be clustered around individual streets in a local area. So in a very short space of time, it can change the nature of an area, and the government at the moment don't provide enough either power for local authorities to refuse where the saturation point has been breached, but they also don't require enough of local authorities who refuse to take part completely. And I think it's very important that everybody mucks in, steps up to our responsibilities and plays its fair share.
Okay, I'm going to bring myself back on, so just give me a second. First of all, there's an acknowledgement there by Jim McMahon by using the word saturation point that there is such a thing as having too many refugees in a community and it putting strain on the local demographics. He said it himself. That doesn't make me a racist. He said that himself. That he just used the word saturation point, but that's what he meant. That's what he meant. And he talked about doing the fair share and other places doing the fair share as well, and some local authorities refusing. So it's clear. If you asked anybody in this town, it's clear we've reached saturation point. We've long passed saturation point. And when he describes how certain communities have changed at a neighbourhood level or street level, he knows full well he's making reference to communities in Oldham. He knows all of that. So why did Shah come out and politically grandstand about taking in more refugees from Afghanistan when this town cannot accommodate anymore, and there are other towns and cities across the country that can? Why put yourself forward? Well, let's go back as to why Jim McMahon put the town forward at the time he did. And I think that just demonstrates saturation point, doesn't it? Jim McMahon and Shah now are promoting the town, wanting to take refugees because the council gets paid. It's no different than the Building Schools for the Future programme. Councils get paid. They get money. And all of the negativity, all of the challenges, all of the pressures are transferred onto us, the communities who live in the town. That's what that is. And sorry, Mark, Serco aren't running around unchecked in Oldham. A climate has been created where Serco are able to do this. A lot of the landlords who mopped up property in Oldham, 10, 20, 30, bought streets up at a time, did so at the time of housing market renewal. HMR. How many of you remember HMR? The most obvious legacy of HMR is Durka, where entire communities were destroyed, and 15, 20 years later there's just brownfield plots of land left there. When HMR came along, housing market renewal came along, the council compulsory purchased thousands of properties across the town. Neighbourhood groups went to court, failed, because the council used their own valuers, to value homes people had lived in for generations at £30,000-40,000, when the cost of a 2-bedroom house equivalent was £100,000. An entire generation, predominantly of our working class elderly, lost their homes and were moved into rented accommodation from the pittance they got back. Some of those homes were then later demolished and you saw some of the housing association houses that have gone up around the town. Other plots were just left as wasteland, as you see in Durka. And then there were entire streets that were bought up where there was nothing wrong with the houses in the first place. So private property developers, landlords, private landlords, bought up streets at a time at knockdown prices. Bought up streets at a time at knockdown prices. No wonder they're giving them out to Serco. They don't care. So the council were responsible for targeting thriving, stable communities and shifting them whereby now Serco have got their hands on them and they're bringing people in from all over the place without any support structure, without the local infrastructure. And I think this, I say this with sincerity, with open hostility from the host community. If there is open hostility from the host community because the host community's needs themselves are not met, it's a recipe for disaster. It's not racism, it's a recipe for disaster. And housing market renewal, HMR, was riddled with corruption. Across the country, riddled with corruption. Councillors were involved. Because some of it, as well as houses being demolished, a lot of houses received grants to bring them up to a certain standard. So whilst perfectly functional homes in Durka, Fittonhill were being demolished, comparable houses in Glodick and Werneth were receiving grants for refurbishment. I'm not joking. That parallel process took place simultaneously. There's numerous stories of councillors or councillors' brothers, because that's how it works in the Asian families. The wealth is kept in the family rather than with an individual, which is how they circumnavigate all the checks and balances. It's one of the primary reasons why so many members of the Pakistani community in this town or across the country marry their cousins, is to keep wealth within the family. So they benefited. They benefited extensively. And here's McMahon talking nonsense about housing. And talking absolute bollocks about refugees and refugee support. We all know what needs to happen in Oldham. We need to spin ourselves around from becoming a welfare dependent town that has wave after wave after wave of poor asylum seekers, immigrants coming in, when they're no longer sustainable at the rate they have been for the last 20 years. It's just not sustainable. And we need to build back better ourselves. We need to grow our own. And to grow our own, we need to value our own. That's not racism. That's pragmatism. How can I help others if I haven't fed myself first? They did indeed, Nick. They did indeed. Private landlords did buy houses in Primrose Bank with inside knowledge. And in the background of all of this, where McMahon is saying we need more money, we need more investment, we need more money, we're spending £100 million on an eco centre in Glodick, where we can go glamping in Glodick for £100 million. And we're spending £68 million on spindles. And we all know, like every other project that's gone on before, these projects will also run over budget. We'll be lucky to get away with £200 million being spent on foolishness. Let me carry on, sorry, I'll find it again. You'll have to just bear with me whilst I click forward.
This week, the new leader of our largest city
with a handful of private landlords for their housing stock, which can be clustered around individual streets in the local area. So in a very short space of time, it can change the nature of an area, and the government at the moment don't provide enough either power for local authorities to refuse where the saturation point has been breached, but they also don't require enough of local authorities who refuse to take part completely. And I think it's very important that everybody mucks in, steps up to our responsibilities and plays its fair share.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, still to come, the statue to a political pioneer unveiled in her former constituency of Blackburn. But first, another political pioneer. Michael Gove was talking about the benefits of places like Oldham and Wigan, which we've discussed, of a successful Manchester. And this week, the city selected its first ever female councillor.
No, we don't need that. Watch him name drop Arood Shah. It's interesting.
As I might have liked, but I know some of it's protected under the new schemes. We've all got to play a role in meeting the cost of health and social care. And of course, we don't want to increase taxes, but the people on whom the taxes are increased benefit from that too, actually. So if you're on a low income, the money that you're saved if you end up needing care is an amount of money that you would never be able to pay for privately, but it gets paid for by the state because of those taxes that you've put in.
All right, so Jim, just respond to that people that on low income will also benefit.
Well, they're not going to, because actually what we're going to see coming in April is a council tax hike that will be to fund social care. And it's a matter of fact that for lower earning households, they will pay 6% of their household income in council tax compared to just over 1% for the highest earners. So it's a hugely regressive tax, and to fund social care, that's where the lion's share of the money is going to come from, and it's just not sustainable.
Just quickly going back to Bev Craig there, you were 30, so even younger than her, when you took over at Oldham Council. You must understand how she feels. She's got a big job ahead of her.
She is, but she's an outstanding leader, and I think she's going to put Manchester through the next phase of its journey. And you know, I grew up in Manchester. I've seen its growth from the kind of dirty, urban, post-industrial decline to what it is now, which is a social, economic giant. And I think she's going to be an important part of that.
How important it is to towns like Oldham. What do you want to see her doing to help Oldham?
Well, first of all, the collective leadership around Greater Manchester, with obviously Andy Byrne as the mayor, but then the 10 leaders of local authorities. And I think it's fantastic now that of the 10 local authority leaders, 4 of those are women, and actually 2 young women, both in Bev and Arood Shah, of course, in Oldham. So I think, you know, a genuine partnership where we recognise that we can only rise up together if we work together and have a single plan for Greater Manchester. And then Oldham will, of course, then get its fair share.
Okay, well,
Okay, I'll stop it there. I think that's all I want of that interview. Let me bring myself up. Did you notice Jim McMahon is a liar? Jim McMahon is a liar. He admitted it himself. He grew up in Manchester. He's not from Oldham. So why is his Twitter handle Jim from Oldham? He's not from Oldham at all. He moved to Oldham to become a politician, or he moved to Failsworth, that part of Failsworth, to become a politician. He's not from our town at all. He's simply here to use us as a stepping stone in his political journey. So no, he's not from Oldham. And he's making reference to council tax. And it's regressive. Do you know why Jim McMahon is making reference to council tax and why it's regressive? I'll wait for some comments. And then I'll share with you what I know. So by all means, right away. If you haven't, please, there's 32 of you that have liked this transmission so far. I'm just checking, sorry. There's 60 odd of you watching it. So, you know, I'd like you to like the video if possible, please. And if you can buy me a coffee, I'd happily accept a coffee. And I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes whilst you put up your comments. Because I think it's worth you knowing what the Labour Party's agenda plans is around council tax. I'll share it with you. I'm just going to go and get myself a drink and I'll come back. No, okay, benefits, okay, well, Jack said they go. Okay, this is the situation we find ourselves in. The current income from council tax is not enough for towns like Oldham that misspend their money. With 40 million odd pounds in interest only payments, you're not raising enough money. That's obvious. The government limits what you can raise council tax by every year. And that's not going to be enough. 3%, 5%, 7%, 10%, whatever it is, it'll just be enough to keep going as is for another year, another 2 years, another 3 years. It's not going to solve any of our problems. So the Labour Party strategy is they want to reform council tax into something else. And that means they want more money out of people in a different way. So way number one is they're pushing for, instead of the bans we have now, they're pushing for a tax of, I think it's 0.45% or 1% or whatever, but there's a figure they've got. You pay based on the valuation of your house. So if your house is worth £100,000, say you'll pay £1,000. If your house is worth £200,000, you'll pay £2,000. If your house is worth £300,000, you'll pay £3,000, and so on. Now, there's a problem with that. The problem with that, in its first instance, is that a lot of elderly people are owner-occupiers of houses they bought for £5,000, £10,000, £20,000 a long time ago. That's now worth £200,000, £300,000, £400,000, £500,000. They'll basically be bankrupt, but Labour have a plan. You know what Labour's plan is? If you're elderly and live in a property that's risen in value, and if they base your council tax on that, you don't have to pay them. You can borrow the money of the government to make those payments, and the debt that you have, plus interest, once you pop it, the government will take that amount from the proceeds of the sale of your house. So that's plan number one for the Labour Party, is to have the tax based on the valuation of your house, of your specific house. And what will happen there, so we're clear what will happen there, can you see the redistribution of the bills? Areas like Glodwick, Westwood, Coldhurst, Wearmouth, where the cartels, and I've shared this, so I'm not making this up now, I've shared this with the video when I went around Westwood and Coldhurst and talked about how house prices are artificially kept low because a lot of the transactions are under, are brown envelopes and cash, because that's how the cartels recycle the money laundering. They pay people in cash and they've got to spend that cash in a certain way. So a house will go for 100 grand, but really £50,000 has been paid in cash on top of the 100 grand that no one knows about. So what will happen there is all of those areas will benefit from this rejigging of council tax, because their house prices will be artificially lowered, whilst the rest of us will pay more. That is the Labour Party plan for council tax. There's nothing in the Labour Party plan for working our way out of this mess, and instead all he wants is more money, more money, more money to continue as we are. It isn't to come with upward solutions to get out of this mess. It's more money and more money and more money to keep his high cost civic centre running the way it is. Well, there you go. It's wrong, isn't it? It's fundamentally wrong. It's fundamentally wrong. So what are the council doing? Let me bring up a couple of things to show what the council are doing. So this is the council's response of building back better. Thank you to the 6 or so of you who I'm now up to 38 likes on, thanks. First of all, they've created a year-long project to explore poverty in Oldham. So they want to understand poverty in Oldham. Oldham Poverty Truth Commission is what it's called. I touched on this last week. I'm going again on this because I think it's important. This is their plan. They have launched a year-long project to explore poverty. Like if 20 years of Labour Party, 30 years, 40 years they've been in power, give or take. They've not learnt what poverty is in Oldham. They've launched a year-long poverty commission. We want to change the story of poverty for everyone in Oldham, and that means better understanding people's experiences, building relationships across our communities, and in changing the underlying culture. How will that address poverty? How on earth is that going to address poverty? Councillor Shah is of course one of the civic commissioners on the programme. As leader, I am determined this council will do all we can to build a borough where everyone has the opportunity to fulfil their collective potential and people are not limited by who they are or where they live. Well, how are you going to do that? How have you been doing that for the last 40 years? We have a responsibility to understand why poverty affects so many people in our communities. She wants to understand. She's launched, the leader of the council has launched a poverty commission, spending God knows how much money, so she can understand why poverty affects so many people. She wants to understand why poverty affects so many people. Why are people poor? Is what she's saying. She wants a commission to tell her why people are poor in Oldham. And the way she's going to do that isn't about writing policies that sit on the shelf. No, no, no. This is about speaking to real people with real lived experiences and using that understanding to do all we need to make a real difference to people's lives. It's a significant statement. I'll read it again and I'll tell you why after I read it. This isn't about writing policies that will sit on the shelf. It is about speaking to real people with real lived experience and using that understanding to do all we can to make a real difference to people's lives. You know what that is? That is an admittance that for 40 years, whoever's run this council hasn't been speaking to real people with real lived experiences and have decided for themselves what they're going to do. Now, again, in the background of all of this, Paul, if there was any truth, any sincerity to any of this bullshit, they would cancel Northern Routes and they would cancel the crazy Spindles farce. Because the £200 million there, give or take, I'm sure would make a hell of a difference. It's obvious, isn't it? It's absolutely obvious. And let me bring this up. You like this? We'll do this together. While the experiences of the commissioners will be critical to the project, a survey has also been launched to develop as full a picture as possible of poverty in Oldham. Answers to the survey questions will be collected anonymously by the commission partners and analysed by the commissioners to help guide their work. So this survey will apparently develop as full a picture as possible of poverty. You ready? This is the survey. What does it mean to you to experience poverty? What has made a difference to you, friends or family, when you have faced poverty? What do you most want to change through this commission? That's it. That is the survey that they've got. That is the survey that they've got. So this survey will apparently develop as full a picture as possible of poverty. It's a farce, isn't it? It's a farce. It is intended that Oldham's Commission will build on the success of this approach in more than 20 places around the country, including Salford and Manchester. It has not been successful at all. Apart from bringing the consultants in. Oh, look. What's this? Action Together. This is the organisation that Oldham Council fund. They want grassroots commissioners, which is what they've now recruited. Funded for by the council. With your money. It's a joke. It's a farce. It's just an absolute joke. But it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there. The leader of Oldham Council has also launched I'm trying to find it. This. The Oldham Economic Review Board. And sorry, give me a second. I just want to bring it up on. Here we go. Looking to the future with Oldham's Economic Review Board. Oldham's brand new Economic Review Board. I'll bring myself up on this. Just give me 1 second, sorry, so I can fix myself here whilst you see me at the same time. There you go. It met for the first time on the 7th of October. The board has been created with the purpose of exploring how we drive forward Oldham's economy, create new jobs and attract people to live and work here. Okay, so how we drive forward Oldham's economy, objective 1. Create new jobs, objective 2. Attract people to live here, attract people to work here, right? 4 objectives. I read Shah again. This bit. That's why I've set up this new Oldham Economic Review Board, an independent group of experts. Her words, an independent group of experts in their respected fields who will contribute their incredible knowledge and skills and explore what we can do to ensure Oldham succeeds. So she set up an Oldham Economic Review Board, independent, with those 4 aims. Let's have a look. The chair of the board the chair of the board there is Alan Francis, principal of the college. He's not on here for some reason, so they forgot the name of the chair on the board, unless I'm missing his name there. No, he's not on there, is he? So Alan Francis is the chair of the Oldham board. Alan Francis is the principal of Oldham College. Prior to being the principal of Oldham College, he was also the bloke who was involved in Waterhead Academy, which was in special measures, and he was forced to hand it over to a different trust. And he was also involved in the in that 14 to 19 bit near the college that was separate, that also collapsed with hardly any students. I'm not blaming him. I have an understanding of how difficult it is to deliver education. But that's his track record. Prior to his role in the college, do you know where Alan Francis worked? Alan Francis was employed by Oldham Council. So that's how independent he is. So Alan Francis was employed by the council. So let's have a look at some of the others. Ruby Bugai Wood. It's a marketing woman, self-employed kind of thing. She'll do your social media pages for you. That's who she is. A couple of people from the University of Manchester. Clive Mehmet sits on loads of boards. His name just adds credibility to boards, really. Emma Barton, Paul Boots Error. What do you make of that? Is that the Emma Barton? Northern Care Alliance, Greater Manchester Combined Authority, the Chamber Business Centre, a housing consultant and former chief executive of First Choice Homes, which was the arm's length housing association of Oldham Council. Bilal Rahman, I'll get back to him later. Laura Windsor Welsh, Oldham Action Together, that's the voluntary sector support organisations funded by Oldham Council. Alan Harding, I know someone else from the Andy Burnham's office, Greater Manchester Combined Authority. And Kashif Ashraf, who's getting around a bit, who is just a serial Asian networker. So the only two business type people on here is Ruby Wood. If you go on her webpage, you'll see. And they've got Bilal Rahman. Bilal owns that Kicksonic place in Westwood. where all the councillors like Councillor Mushtaq hang out. And he made his money from the, what's it called? The vape shops. I'm not joking. He made his money from the vape shops, from importing vape. Where are the business people on this Oldham Economic Review Board? Where are the business people? Where are the business people who've built up businesses that give local people jobs in historical industries that this town has an appetite for, of where we can realistically take our working classes who are underutilized and give them meaningful careers? Where are they? Where are they on this board? Where is their expertise? We are a town of engineers. We use our hands. There's a national shortage of plumbers, of electricians, of builders. Where are these industries represented on here? Manufacturing, where are? Do you see what they're doing? It's absolute nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. And the nonsense continues. I'll show you why the nonsense continues. Because I cannot understand this. If you can understand it, please tell me, because, you know, I can't understand this. It's their homepage. It's not me. It's their homepage. Key objectives. To determine and understand the challenges faced by Oldham in relation to employment, education, health, crime and well-being. So first of all, is to determine, so that means to identify and understand. Wow. So if you don't understand the challenges faced in the first place, why are you on the bloody board? I could have asked 4 people at the bus stop this morning. But now it gets funny. As part of a continuous framework, the OERB is to make recommendations on appropriate solutions to aforementioned challenges, leading to greater independence by growing employment and business opportunities across the borough. What does that mean? What on earth does that mean? As part of a continuous framework, the OERB is to make recommendations on appropriate solutions to aforementioned challenges, leading to greater independence by growing employment and business opportunities across the borough. What does that mean? Gets worse. I won't bring it back on screen. I'll just read it for you. To strategise the promotion of borough-wide opportunities, including employment, business, housing and resources, aimed at positioning Oldham as a place where people from outside the town would wish to relocate. So they want to strategise the promotion of borough-wide opportunities. What? What? To enhance the profile of Oldham, both regionally and nationally, through recommendations on town centre repositioning. To enhance the profile of Oldham, both regionally and nationally, through recommendations on town centre repurposing, skills and business support. What? How are you going to enhance the profile of the town nationally through town centre repurposing? How? How? I'm sorry, it's bollocks. It's absolute bollocks. This is gobbledygook bollocks. I'm looking at the side and Paul's going for it with Emma Barton. Yes, Paul, it is that Emma Barton. It is at Emma Barton. Who wrote this shit? To strengthen the relationship Oldham has with Greater Manchester Combined Authority. Well, you've already given... Oh yeah, Sean Fielding's not there anymore. So his girlfriend working there now no longer has an impact on Oldham Council's relationship with Andy Burnham's team. To strengthen the relationship Oldham has with Greater Manchester Combined Authority and central government, leading to Oldham gaining the support required to ensure viability of the sub-objectives set out by the OERB. So they want to build trust with central government. I think that's what they're trying to say. They want to build trust with central government so central government will give them more money. They've just sacked the CBE bloke who got 35 odd million quid in for the town that the government trusted to make sure that the town would do what it needed to do with the money. And as soon as they got the money, they sacked him. And they want to build relationships with central government. I think that's it, isn't it? I think that's it, Denise. And the best bit? No, not the best bit. Just another bit. Yeah, these are the documents. Shall we have a laugh? I've not pressed this yet. I've never pressed Oldham's economic presentation. The Oldham plan 2017 to 2022. So this should be delivered by now. Yeah, this was a 5-year plan that finishes in 2022. This is going to waste my Oh, isn't it nice to set it up like a traffic light? This is the Oldham plan. So here you go. Oldham today is a unique place, an original northern powerhouse. Innovation and enterprise are part of our DNA. Listen, I'm not going to disagree with this, right? Innovation, and if innovation and enterprise are part of our DNA, we're on that board are the business leaders or are the people of innovation and enterprise. So I just Paul, look, they've got northern roots on here. Oh. Place-based integration. It's just absolute gobbledygook nonsense. It is nonsense. It is. This town is led by... We are led by donkeys. Or gerbils. Or hamsters. We're led by hamsters. How about that? Oh, brother Jamal. Brother Jamal. And yes, Paul, we'll have paid some consultants hundreds of thousands of pounds for this bullshit. But they're still in power. They're still in power, and they'll still be in power in May. And that's the seriousness of it, isn't it, Tony? They're still in power. And they're still in power in May. Once you've finished with your multi-part series, Paul, I'll put all of it together, and I'll pull out the bits that I think are the key headlines and do something with it. I'm waiting for more from you on that. Okay, let me show you something else. Do you remember Hannah and Al Ottman from the Sunday Times, the former Labour Party press officer who attacked me with all that craziness and all that nonsense? You all remember her? This is a woman called Jess Bernard. Jess Bernard was actually like the leader of Young Labour. So she's quite senior in the Labour Party. Lefty, but she's senior in the Labour Party. A young woman, you know, admirable, young, idealistic. You know what Hannah Al Ottman did to her? This is what she did to her. Hannah Al Ottman posted this. This stuff matters. Disinformation is dangerous. A lot of journalists tweeted it, not because it was premeditated line pushed back by Starmer's office, but because we also heard it and because it was remarkable enough to be newsworthy. So she's going about something internal in the Labour Party. It's bollocks, but ignore that. Hannah Al Ottman is a Labour Party press officer regardless of where she works. Disinformation is dangerous, is what Jess Barnard replied. A few years ago, Hannah was looking to run a vicious and completely false story about me and an MP accusing us of having an affair. When I called her disputing it, asking for evidence and audibly upset, she said she wasn't interested in speaking to me. She wouldn't give me any information. I ended up having to tell my partner, family, and my employers that this story might run and that I was given no say. It didn't run in the end, thank goodness, but the impact it had and the way Hannah treated me then was disgusting. At the time, I had no platform to challenge this publicly. I think I was 21 or 22 at the time. Makes me think about all the ordinary people who face similar threats or smears by those in positions of power just for trying to be involved in politics. That is who Hannah Al Ottman really is. People still with me? Tying in with Black History Month, Oldham have tag-teamed hate crime. So to make sure that you white people, if you thought Black History Month was anything other than a stick to beat you with, let's tackle hate crime at the same time. I should do that, really. I should get my poor deprived ethnic minority t-shirt or something, and every time someone says anything to me it's racism, racism, anti-Muslim. I've fallen off a motorbike one too many times and my leg doesn't work the same. Maybe I need a disabled badge and claim that as well. You know, it's nonsense, but you can see what they're doing. You can see what they're doing, and you've seen what they've done with Black History Month. They've weaponized it. And as well as weaponizing it, what they've done is whitewashed, and I don't mean in a racial, but they've whitewashed what actually took place in our own town hundreds of years ago to our own people. And that injustice eats up all of us. And as long as they continue with this approach, this town will never move, or no town in this country will ever move to a place where we can tackle systemic injustice. Because the way in which we tackle systemic injustice isn't by demonizing one group whilst victimizing another. It's by developing collaborative responses. And they're not going to do that. They're not going to do this do that in this town. They're not going to do that in a town where, if the ethnic minorities, and I mean by that I mean predominantly the Pakistanis and the Bangladeshis, if they stop fearing the wider white community and stop using racism as an excuse for not overcoming adversity. And of course there's racism, there's every form of ism in society. And all of us face it. In our own ways, all of us face it. But that doesn't mean we give up. And what they've created is a culture where people don't even try. And in return they get the block vote because they're being protected by this Labour Party. So no. It's a joke. It's a farce. This community building strategy in this town is a complete farce. Speaking of farces, I need to put this photograph up. Give me 1 second. Sorry, it's just not liking my connection. No, it's not having it. Yeah, I'll show you on here. Can you see that? No. Can I bring it up on my... I want to bring it up, so I just want to show it you. So, can I bring it up on my computer? I think I can. Yes, I can. Here you go. That's Brother Jamal out, helping clean the streets up. So he had his clipboard out with him last week, this week as well, doing a litter survey. And now he's pretending to help clean the back streets of Oldham with the bin, with the clean-up team. Because come on, let's be honest. If he was really doing that, would he go out dressed like that? Would he go out wearing those shoes and those jeans if he was really doing that? No. He's not. He's taking us for fools. He's been taking us for fools for years. He's taking us for fools yet again. Okay, how are we all doing? It's just after 11 o'clock. Brilliant. Now, you wouldn't be wearing those shoes, would you, Deb? You won't be wearing those jeans either. Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, I said I had some information, and I'll share this in good faith. It's come from a trusted source, and in the context of what's happened in the country, you might want to stay for 5 minutes, Paul, because I'm going to be done in 5 minutes. So you saw what happened with Sarah Everard, that poor young woman. You've seen the way the politicians responded. Shah tweeted about it. Amanda Chadderton tweeted about it, seeking to politically gain. And I got this information in completely good faith. It's from a source from within the council, and another source from within the community that have given me information in the past that has been 100% accurate. And this is the information. An Oldham councillor has attempted to extract sexual favours in return for helping a local person, a local woman. That's right. The news I have is an Oldham councillor has attempted to extract sexual services from a woman in exchange for helping her. And she's reported it to the council. And there are text messages. And as astonishing as it sounds, I've heard, and I can't prove this, I'm only sharing what I've been told to a private audience on here, but it's come from a source I trust. An Oldham councillor has attempted to gain sexual favours from a woman in exchange for supporting her on an issue she had. And apparently there are text messages to prove it. And one of my contacts mentioned something about dick pics. I like to think he was joking on that bit. I wasn't sure, I didn't want to ask. But it's come from a very reputable source, and the council know about it. The council know about it. I think it's in the interests of every councillor in this town to stand up in the council chamber and demand answers from the leader of the council confirming that this is not true. Because I don't want it to be true. I don't think any of us wants it to be true. But my sources tell me that an Oldham councillor has attempted to extract sexual favours from a woman. And for those of you with long histories in this town, this is not the first time it's happened. And all I will say, in the same way it wasn't acceptable 25 years ago, it isn't acceptable now. An Oldham councillor has attempted to extract sexual favours from a woman in return for services. That is the information I have. I believe it to be true. Wish it wasn't, because it comes from a reputable source. And I genuinely hope that the council distance themselves from it and straight away, and they've done it with other things. Well, we know it's not true. They've quashed the rumours straight away and said this is false. What are the chances of that happening? My name is Miah. These are the Sunday night Recusant 9 transmissions. They are supporter only now. I'll try and edit bits for the rest of the people, but no, there's only so much time I have in the week. Please, if you can and are able to support these transmissions to keep going, I know you subscribe. I'm up to 65 subscribers so far. I probably need about 200 to get anywhere near breaking even, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Have a very good evening, and I'll see some of you tomorrow morning when you log on for this tribunal. Take care. Good night.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.